Your sister just purchased a stunning home, my mother declared to 14 relatives gathered for Christmas dinner. Her tone rang out as if unveiling a Nobel laureate. Then she turned to me with a smile, the sort that feels warm at first glance, until you notice it's laced with condescension. So, June, when do you plan to settle down? My sister Vanessa eased back in her chair, new earrings glinting in the candlelight, and let a smirk play across her lips. I set my fork down gently. No need to raise my voice. I never did. I already have, I replied evenly. Paid in full, cash. I simply didn't extend invitations to anyone who questions my worth. 14 forks froze midair. My mother's lips parted, yet no sound emerged. That exchange lasted only the first 5 seconds of what became the longest, most uncomfortable Christmas dinner in Bellamy family history. Before I continue, if this story resonates with you, please take a second to like and subscribe, but only if it truly speaks to you. And feel free to comment below. Tell me your location and the current time where you are. I'm June, 27 years old. This is the account of how I ceased being my family's unseen ATM. Now, let me rewind to October, 2 months before that fateful dinner, the evening one modest bank transfer shifted everything. It was a quiet Thursday in October. I sat cross-legged on my couch in a modest one-bedroom just beyond Millbrook, polishing a client dashboard prototype. My coffee had turned cold an hour earlier. The radiator tapped its familiar auto melody. My phone vibrated on the side table. Mom's name lit the screen. I answered. No greeting, no how are you, just her familiar, drawn-out exhale, then the words. The roof's leaking again, June. The east side. Contractor wants $4,200 to fix it before winter. My pension won't stretch that far. I glanced up at my own ceiling, where a brownish water stain had crept wider for 6 weeks because I'd neglected to contact my landlord. $4,200, more than 2 months' rent. I'll send it tomorrow, I said. You're a good girl, June. Click. 4 words. That was the greatest affection she'd shown since March, and even then, the call had closed with the request to cover Vanessa's car insurance. I placed the phone aside and opened my private spreadsheet, hidden in a desktop folder labeled Family. I'd begun tracking 3 years earlier, after the first emergency call demanding my money. I'd expected a brief list. It wasn't. 3 years, 17 transfers, $31,400, roof fixes, burst pipes, my sister's car insurance, a replacement water heater, security deposit assistance. Each request followed the same pattern, that heavy sigh, the amount, the abrupt hang-up. Never once did gratitude exceed 4 words. I closed the file, wired the $4,200, and went to bed whispering the same tired promise to myself. This is the last time. 2 weeks later, eating leftover soup at the kitchen counter, I foolishly scrolled social media. Vanessa's photo dominated the feed. She stood before a house I'd never glimpsed. Sage green door, crisp white trim, a woven welcome mat likely pricier than my entire meal. Her smile was posed perfectly, held just long enough for the ideal shot. Caption: New beginnings thanks to the best mom ever, plus yellow heart emoji. 47 likes. Lorraine Bellamy had posted a string of red hearts. Uncle Don added clapping hands. Aunt Patty, so happy for you, sweetie. I read every comment. My name appeared in none. No tag, no mention, not even a shadow in the frame. Thanks to the best mom ever. I reread it thrice. A faint unease stirred, subtle like a hidden splinter. I dismissed it. Vanessa had always been the saver. She and Derek must have planned carefully. Good for her. That evening, Mom forwarded the photo to the family group chat. So proud of my girl. Uncle Don thumbs-upped. 2 cousins reacted with hearts. Then Aunt Margot, Dad's sister, who still runs the small flower shop 2 towns away, wrote simply, "Lovely. How's June doing?" I watched. 1 minute, 2, 5, silence. No reply. The chat rolled on to Thanksgiving logistics. Margot's question lingered like a pebble sinking endlessly in deep water. I locked my phone and finished my soup. but that quiet splinter refused to fade. It would take another month to grasp its meaning. Thanksgiving at Mom's carried the usual scents: roasted turkey, cinnamon candles, and that faint, unspoken burnt edge. I'd driven 40 minutes with a homemade apple pie beside me and wine stashed behind the brake pedal. Stepping inside, I saw the dining table first. 12 chairs, every single one filled. Uncle Don, Aunt Patty, cousins, Vanessa, Derek, and several others whose faces merged. At the far end sat a stranger in what had once been my place. "Oh," Mom said, drying her hands on her apron. "That's Kevin, Lily's new boyfriend. I assumed you wouldn't mind the side table. You're so accommodating." The side table was a rickety metal folding table squeezed between counter and recycling bin. No cloth, no candle, just a paper plate and a plastic-wrapped fork. I sat. Through the doorway, I heard Mom rise and lift her glass. To Vanessa and Derek and their beautiful new home. Glasses chimed. Laughter rose. "Cheers! So proud of you both." No one glanced kitchenward. I ate quietly, absorbing the celebration of a home I'd unknowingly helped finance. Later, as dishes stacked, I washed them, mine and theirs. My pie remained untouched on the counter. Mom had ordered a bakery one, complete with gold sticker. Driving home, I lingered in the driveway 10 full minutes before starting the engine. No tears, just profound exhaustion. That night, I opened my laptop, not for work. I pulled up bank statements and for the first time, aligned dates. To explain what I discovered, I must go further back. Back to when I was 14. My father died on a Tuesday in April. Heart attack, 44 years old. One second he was pouring orange juice, the next he lay on the floor, glass rolling slowly toward the table leg as I rushed in. Ambulance arrived in 9 minutes. Not soon enough. After the funeral, Mom didn't collapse theatrically. She just dimmed. Mail accumulated behind the door, bills turned pink, then red, meals dwindled to freezer remnants, then vanished entirely. Vanessa, 17, mourned the teenage way. Sealed in her room, music loud enough to vibrate the walls. She skipped 2 weeks of school. No one challenged it. She was the sensitive one. I was 14 when I called the insurance company myself. I sat at the kitchen table, clutching a cordless phone and a pile of envelopes I barely understood, deciphering terms like past due, beneficiary, and grace period. For 3 straight months, I cooked boxed mac and cheese every night. I wrote checks mimicking my father's handwriting because I hadn't developed my own signature yet. My mother recovered gradually, but my role never reverted. What began as crisis hardened into routine. I became the fixer. Vanessa became the one who was fixed. My father used to say it to me quietly, usually on the porch after dinner. "You're like me, June. You'll figure it out." I once took it as praise. Now I recognize it for what it truly was, an early, unspoken apology for the burden he was leaving behind. 3 years ago, when Vanessa got engaged to Derek, my mother called me first, not to celebrate, but to run numbers. "Your sister deserves a beautiful day, June. I can manage about $8,000, but I'll need you to cover the difference." The wedding totaled $12,000. A simple chapel ceremony on Birch Lane, a garden reception behind the VFW hall, 80 guests. Modest by most measures, yet $4,000 was everything I'd saved for an advanced UX certification that would have lifted my salary to the next level. I transferred it on a Friday. By Saturday, I'd convinced myself it was the right thing. The bridesmaid list arrived 2 weeks later. 4 names, all Vanessa's high school friends and gym buddies. Mine wasn't there. She wants her friends beside her, June. You understand, you're not really the dress-up type anyway. On the wedding day, I stood in the 3rd row in a clearance rack dress. The official photographer never reached my side of the aisle, so I ended up behind a borrowed camera capturing candids for the reception slideshow. I documented my sister's happiest day through a 2-inch viewfinder. Her thank you post went live that Sunday night. She tagged her mother, all 4 bridesmaids, Derek, the florist. She didn't tag me. $4,000, a certification I never earned, a photo reel of someone else's perfect moment. I said nothing. That was always my error. I said nothing. I could detail every transfer, but the pattern is stark and unchanging. It began with my mother's long, practiced exhale over the phone, a sound she'd honed into quiet coercion, and ended with a dollar amount. The water heater in 2023, $1,800. My mother later told her neighbor Ruth that God had sent a discount through the plumber. God had no hand in it. My checking account did. Vanessa's car insurance after she rear-ended someone in early 2024, $2,400 for the year. My mother said, "She's your sister, June. She has a family to think about." Vanessa followed up with a single text, "Thanks, one thumbs-up emoji, one emoji for $2,400 annually." I maintained my spreadsheet the way others keep a diary, every date, every amount, every excuse. Beside each entry ran a second column, what they did for me. That column remained empty. 3 years of giving, row after row, and the return side looked untouched, pristine as new snow. What stings most isn't that my mother accepted the money, it's that she erased me from the narrative completely. At family gatherings, she would tell Uncle Don and Aunt Patty, "I get by on my own. It's tight, but I'm proud. Chin high, like a figure in a vintage wartime portrait." Everyone nodded, admiring her resilience. All the while, my account drained in silence. $31,400, 3 years, one emoji. Each time I promised myself this is the last time, but the last time never arrived. Not until October, when I finally aligned dates on a bank statement and the numbers refused to lie. In September, 1 month before the roof transfer, I stopped by my mother's house to return spare keys from the previous plumber visit. The front door stood ajar, the way it does when she airs out the kitchen after cooking. I stepped inside and heard her voice floating from the back rooms, pitched slightly higher and sweeter, the FaceTime tone. I should have called out. Instead, I froze in the hallway, hand still on the knob, because I heard my name. Honestly, I don't know what June's doing with her life. She just sits at that computer all day. At least you have a real home, a real husband. Sometimes I worry she'll end up alone and I'll have to take care of her. Vanessa's laugh floated through the speaker. Light, effortless. The kind of laugh that isn't deliberately cruel. It's cruel because it never pauses to notice. The phone rang 3 times. "Hi, this is June Bellamy, Lorraine's daughter. I'm calling to check on the roof repair you did at her place in October." A brief pause. "Ma'am, I haven't been to that address since April. Your mom called about the east side, but she canceled the appointment, said she'd handle it some other way." "Some other way?" I echoed softly. I thanked him, ended the call, and sat motionless on my couch while the final pieces clicked into place. The roof wasn't leaking. It likely hadn't leaked since spring, if it ever had at all. My $4,200 hadn't bought shingles or flashing. It had become the down payment on a house with a sage green door and a welcome mat I'd never been asked to cross. And my sister knew. She knew. Because $4,200 doesn't arrive by accident. You simply choose not to question its origin. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with the spreadsheet glowing and an untouched glass of water beside it. 3 years of my life distilled into neat rows and columns. 17 transfers, $31,400. Next to each entry, the second column, what they did for me, remained glaringly blank, the cursor blinking like it was still waiting for an entry that would never arrive. I tried to recall the last time my mother called simply to ask how I was. Not, "How are you?" followed by a request, but just, "How are you?" full stop. I couldn't find a single instance. Not this year, not last. I tried to remember my last 3 birthdays. 26, no calls. I ate pad thai alone and watched a documentary about bioluminescent creatures in the deep ocean. 25, a text from my mother at 11 p.m. HBD, like an afterthought she'd remembered on her way to bed. 24, Vanessa asked me to drive her to a prenatal appointment that morning because Derek was pulling a double. She never acknowledged it was my birthday. I didn't remind her. I closed the spreadsheet, not in rage, but in the strange, crystalline clarity that arrives when you finally stop debating facts. I opened a new tab. Zillow, Millbrook area. Homes under $180,000. Here's the arithmetic my family never suspected. I earned $95,000 a year. I lived in a $600 a month apartment. I drove a 2016 sedan with 140,000 miles. I took no vacations. I replaced clothes only when seams gave way. For 5 years, I had saved like someone bracing for catastrophe. It turned out the catastrophe was my own family. $142,000 cash sat in a savings account no one knew existed. If I stopped feeding a void that never filled, I could own a house outright in 3 months. No mortgage, no cosigner, no mother's name anywhere on the deed. I closed the laptop at 4 a.m. For the first time in years, this is the last time was no longer a wish, it was a decision. Aunt Margot's flower shop stood on a hushed street in Drayton, 2 towns east of Millbrook. Small hand-painted sign, bell above the door, coolers lined with arrangements she crafted before dawn each morning. She'd run it solo for 20 years, ever since Uncle Gene died. I hadn't planned to tell her anything. I simply needed a place that wasn't my apartment or my mother's kitchen. But Margot had a gift for turning silence into an opening. She poured tea into a chipped blue mug, placed it before me, and settled across the work table strewn with rose stems and satin ribbon. She studied my face the way she'd always had, like she was rereading a familiar page. "You look like your father. The week before he told me he was marrying your mother. That same expression, the one that says you've already made your mind." I told her everything. The $4,200, the contractor who hadn't visited since April, the Zillow timeline, the spreadsheets, the $31,400 that had flowed out of my account over 3 years and disappeared into a family that pretended it stood on its own. Margot listened without a single interruption. When I finished, she set her teacup on its saucer with a soft, deliberate clink and folded her hands. "Honey, I've watched this play out for 13 years. Your mother loves Vanessa, the way she loved gazing in a mirror. And you remind her of your father. She never forgave him for leaving." The words landed somewhere deep behind my ribs. "What are you going to do about it?" she asked. "I'm going to stop paying for a family that doesn't see me, and I'm going to buy my own house." Margot held my gaze for a long beat. Then she nodded once. "Good. And if you need a witness at closing, you call me." The first week of December, I ran into Ruth Kendrick at the grocery store. Ruth lived 3 houses down from my mother on Maple, the neighbor who brought banana bread to every newcomer and collected town news the way others collect coins. She'd been a loan officer at Millbrook Community Bank forever, notarized half the county's documents, and still called everyone honey. She spotted me in the cereal aisle, cart half full, and brightened as if she'd brightened my day. "Oh, June, I haven't seen you since summer. Your mom can't stop talking about Vanessa's house, so proud. You know I helped with the paperwork at the bank, right?" I nodded, offered the small, practiced smile I reserved for conversations about my sister's triumphs. She leaned in a fraction, voice dropping to what she considered confidential. "Between you and me," she murmured, "I hope they get back on track soon. First few months of a mortgage are always the hardest, especially with other debt in the mix. But your sister's sharp. She'll sort it out." "Other debt?" I kept my face neutral. "I'm sure she will." Ruth patted my arm, wished me a Merry Christmas, and rolled toward the dairy cage humming Jingle Bells. I stood in the cereal aisle another 30 seconds, clutching a box of oatmeal I didn't want, and turning 2 phrases over and over like smooth stones. Get back on track. and other debt. The picture I'd been piecing together since Thanksgiving night was finally complete. Vanessa hadn't bought a beautiful house. Vanessa was sinking in one, and my mother had used my money to help her push under. The call arrived on a Wednesday evening, second week of December. I was cooking pasta, nothing elaborate, when my mother's name lit the screen with the predictability of a recurring bill. I answered. The exhale came on cue. "June, the heating bill just came in, $480. It's going to be a cold winter." I turned the burner lower, leaned against the counter, drew a slow breath. "Mom, I can't cover it this month. You should call the energy company. They have a payment assistance program for seniors. I can text you the number." Silence. 4 seconds of it, which, when you've never said no before, stretches like 40. "Excuse me?" Her voice didn't rise, it cooled. "I can't cover it," I repeated. My tone stayed even, though my free hand gripped the counter edge until my knuckles ached. "I raised you alone, June. After your father died, I held this family together. I didn't ask for much, I just asked you to care." Click. She hung up. No goodbye. Just the flat silence of a disconnected call and the hiss of pasta water boiling over onto the burner. 20 minutes later, the family group chat flared to life. My mother, "Pray for me. It's going to be a cold Christmas." Uncle Don, "Hang in there, Lorraine." Aunt Patty, "You're the strongest woman I know." Vanessa, "Mom, we'll figure it out." I stared at those 4 words. We'll figure it out. Lovely sentiment, $0 attached. No offer to cover the heating bill, no private message saying, "I've got this." Just a heart emoji dropped into the thread, letting the expectation drift like smoke. Someone else would step in. Someone always had. Not anymore. I found the house on a Saturday afternoon in mid-December, snow collecting softly against the windowsill as I scrolled listings. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a modest fenced yard anchored by a crab apple tree the description promised would bloom pink come spring. Gray siding, porch railing that needed replacing, kitchen counters still the laminate of the late 90s. But the foundation was sound. The inspection report was flawless. The roof itself had been replaced 2 years earlier. $159,000. I could pay cash. I called Margot that evening. "I found it. When do we sign?" Closing was December 18th, exactly 1 week before Christmas. I sat at a long conference table under fluorescent lights in a title company office, a fake ficus wilting in the corner. Margot sat beside me, purse in her lap, reading glasses low on her nose like she was there to scrutinize every line. The notary slid the stack of documents toward me. "Buyer present?" "Present," I said. Under the table, Margot reached over and gave my hand one firm squeeze, then released it. I signed where instructed. 32 pages, my hand cramping by the 20th. When the last page was initialed, the notary smiled. "Congratulations, it's yours." Margot removed her glasses and met my eyes. Your father would have cried right now, the good kind. I drove to the house alone afterward, parked at the curb, walked up the steps, slid the key into the lock, and turned it. The door opened onto an empty living room, bare hardwood floors, plain white walls, the clean scent of fresh paint mingling with winter chill. No furniture, no curtains, no notifications buzzing in my pocket. Just quiet. And for the first time in memory, the quiet didn't mean I'd been overlooked. It meant the space belonged to me. I told no one except Margot. I didn't post a single photo. Christmas was 7 days away, and for the first time at a family dinner, I carried a truth I no longer needed to conceal. My mother's invitation landed in the group chat on a Monday, 6 days before the meal. Christmas Eve dinner at my house, 6 p.m., bring a dish. Vanessa replied almost instantly, Derek and I will bring the glazed ham, followed by 3 decorative emojis because Vanessa never let a feeling stand plain. Uncle Don confirmed, Aunt Patty confirmed, 2 cousins confirmed. Ruth Kendrick, always invited because she lived alone and arrived with excellent wine, confirmed. I studied the thread for a long while. If I skipped it, my mother would spin the story she preferred. June couldn't even show up after everything I've done. She'd deliver it with that rehearsed melancholy, heads would shake, and I'd become the ungrateful daughter in family lore. If I went, I'd likely end up at the folding table in the kitchen again, washing dishes while toasts were raised to Vanessa. I'd drive home stuffed with turkey and hollowed out. Unless this year was different. I called Margot. She sent the invite, I'm going, and this time I'm not sitting in the kitchen. A brief pause, then Margot's voice steady as a fence post. Good, neither am I. I typed 2 words into the group chat. I'll be there. No emoji, no exclamation, just plain confirmation, clean as ink on a deed. I wasn't scripting a confrontation or practicing sharp comebacks in the mirror. My only resolution was this. If asked a question, I would answer truthfully. If not asked, I would eat, wish them Merry Christmas, and leave. I would neither lie nor apologize for reality. After 27 years of silence, honesty felt revolutionary enough. 3 days before Christmas, my mother called again. No signature exhale this time. She cut straight to it. A sign she was rattled. Lorraine Bellamy only abandoned her rituals when control slipped. I need you to come early, 5 o'clock. Help set the table, arrange chairs, get the dishes out. Vanessa's handling the ham and centerpiece, so you can take care of the rest. The rest. The unseen labor, the quiet setup that made everything appear effortless, while Vanessa arrived with glazed ham and radiant smile to claim the spotlight. I'll be there at 6, Mom, same as everyone. The line chilled 10 degrees. June, don't be difficult. It's Christmas. I'm not being difficult, Mom. I'm being a guest, same as Vanessa. Another silence. I could almost hear her recalibrating, the way a chess player freezes when a pawn advances unexpectedly. Then she drew the heaviest weapon in her arsenal, drawing her voice into practiced sorrow. Sometimes I think you forget everything I've done for you. Your father wouldn't have wanted this. My stomach clenched. It always did when she invoked him. For 13 years, she'd wielded a dead man's memory like a tether whenever obedience faltered. And for 13 years, it had worked. But this time, Margot's words rose to counter it. She never forgave him for dying. My father wasn't a playing card. He was a man who poured orange juice, said, "You'll figure it out," and left too soon. He would never have wanted his name used as leverage. I'll see you at 6, Mom. I ended the call first. My hands shook against the phone, but I didn't redial. Christmas was 3 days away, and for the first time, I would walk into my mother's house with my spine aligned and my wallet sealed. December 24th, 5:59 p.m. I parked on the street outside my mother's house and switched off the engine. The neighborhood lay hushed. That small town stillness Christmas Eve brings when everything seems to pause between dusk and midnight. My mother's house shined. String lights traced the porch railing, a wreath centered the front door. Through the living room window, I could see silhouettes moving, wine glasses catching candlelight, the dining table already flickering with flames. Cars crowded the curb, Uncle Don's sedan, Aunt Patty's minivan, Ruth Kendrick's blue hatchback, Derek's work truck. At the far end sat Margot's old pickup, the magnetic flower shop sign still on the door. I sat in the car for 2 minutes, opened the glove compartment, and lifted out the one thing I always kept there, A photo of my father and me at the ice cream stand on Route 9, both of us 12 years younger, squinting into summer sun, laughing. I looked at it, breathed, slipped it back, stepped out into the cold. The front door was unlocked. I walked in. Warmth rushed over me first, then the scent of ham, cinnamon, and that faint, unspoken burnt note no one would mention. On the hallway wall hung 8 framed family photos in perfect alignment. I counted them the way I always did, 5 with Vanessa front and center, 2 group shots, one of my father alone, young, in a suit I'd never seen him wear in life. Not one of just me. My mother emerged from the kitchen in her holiday apron, red with embroidered holly. She regarded me the way you regard a package delivered late. "Oh, you came. Good. The table still needs napkins. They're in the hall closet." Not "Merry Christmas, June," not "I'm glad you're here," just a task. "Merry Christmas, Mom," I said. I walked past the closet, past the kitchen, and into the living room. Margot sat in the corner armchair, eggnog in hand, watching me over the rim. She gave one small nod. I sat down. The evening had begun. Dinner arrived at 6:30. 14 people settled around the extended table like actors hitting their marks. Vanessa claimed the chair beside our mother, directly across from Derek. I ended up at the far end, between my 19-year-old cousin Lily and an empty seat no one had bothered to remove. At least I was at the main table this time. Progress. The glazed ham gleamed at the center beneath a chandelier my father had hung the year I was born. Vanessa had tied a sprig of rosemary to the serving fork, a detail so artful it felt staged. It probably was. My mother rose. She lifted her wine glass the way a dignitary raises a ceremonial key, slow, deliberate, commanding attention. "Before we eat, I just want to say how proud I am." Her gaze settled on Vanessa with an expression best described as possession. Vanessa and Derek bought their first home this year, a real home, 3 bedrooms, a yard. That's what family means, building something. She let the word building drift over the table like a benediction reserved for one recipient. Vanessa pressed a hand to her chest, summoning the humble, grateful face she'd perfected through endless rehearsal. Then she addressed the room. "Honestly, it's been a dream. 3 bedrooms, a yard for when we have kids someday. We're just so blessed." Uncle Don raised his glass. "That's wonderful. You're building something real, Vanessa." Aunt Patty beamed. The cousins murmured approval. Across the table, Ruth Kendrick smiled and nodded, but her eyes dipped for a fraction of a second, the brief flicker of someone holding back what they know. No one asked me a question. No one turned my way. I cut my turkey and chewed in silence. From the far end, Margot observed the room the way a cook watches a pot she knows is about to boil over. It happened between main course and dessert, in that soft lull when plates are half cleared and conversation loosens into unguarded territory. My mother leaned forward, tilted her head in that rehearsed pose of maternal worry that always signaled something edged, and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "So, June, your sister has a house, a husband, a plan." She gestured toward Vanessa the way a game show host presents a prize. "When are you going to settle down? You can't just sit behind a laptop forever." Vanessa didn't miss her cue. She eased back, crossed her arms, and offered the smile reserved for a naive, younger cousin at Thanksgiving. "Seriously, June, you're 27. What are you even saving for?" A few people laughed, the polite, awkward variety. Uncle Don chuckled into his wine. Lily stared at her plate. Derek kept his eyes on his fork, jaw tight. Only Margot remained still. Her eggnog sat untouched. Her gaze stayed on me. I looked at my mother, then at Vanessa, then at the table of people who had watched me shrink year after year without a single word. I set my fork down slowly. Metal met porcelain, a small, clean sound that sliced through the room like a pin in a silent cathedral. "Actually, Vanessa," I said, voice even, almost casual, "what exactly did you save for?"
Her smile vanished. Because I know it wasn't the down payment. No one moved. Vanessa blinked twice, rapidly, the blink of someone suddenly caught in bright light. My mother's hand tightened on her wine glass. June, don't start. But I had started, and this time I wouldn't stop. June. My mother's voice dropped low and flat, the tone she used to remind you you were the authority and you were the issue. This is Christmas dinner. This is not the time or place. You're right, Mom. It wasn't the time when you asked me for $4,200 for a roof that wasn't leaking either, but here we are. Lorraine's face blanched, not the slow fade of embarrassment, but the instant pallor of someone caught mid-step. She recovered quickly, she always did. I don't know what you're talking about. That money went to repairs. I called the contractor, Mom. He hasn't been to your house since April. You canceled the appointment. Uncle Don set his glass down. The base hit the table harder than intended. What's going on? Aunt Patty stopped chewing. Lily glanced between me and my mother like she was watching tires lose grip on black ice. Vanessa leans forward, voice adopting that breathy, incredulous register she'd inherited straight from her mother. Seriously, June, you're being so dramatic. This is exactly what you always do. You take something small and blow it up. I looked at her, calm, steady, the way you look at someone when the words have been waiting years to be spoken. Because the truth doesn't need rehearsal. I sent $4,200 because Mom said it was for roof repairs. That money went toward your down payment. And you knew, Vanessa. You knew, and you said nothing. The table fell silent. Derek, who had been staring at his plate, lifted his head. His eyes moved slowly from me to Vanessa and held there. Vanessa opened her mouth. No sound came. In that moment, with 14 pairs of eyes shifting between my sister and me, I saw something new. Vanessa no longer looked smug. She looked frightened. And my mother, for the first time in my life, looked small. I used to wonder why I kept sending money, kept appearing, kept hoping for something as basic as thank you. Maybe you've wondered the same about someone in your life. Why do we keep watering plants that never flower? If you've ever sat at a table like this one, tell me in the comments, what was your breaking point? My mother rose halfway out of her chair, palms flat on the table, trying to reclaim the evening. Let's not ruin Christmas over a misunderstanding. That was when Vanessa made her error. She turned to the table, chin high, voice bright and brittle. Look, whatever June thinks she knows, Derek and I are doing fine. Our house is ours. We're comfortable. Everything's on track. She reached for Derek's hand across the table. Right, babe? Derek didn't take her hand. He looked at her, then at me, then back at her.
His mouth tightened into a thin line, eyes performing calculations he hadn't anticipated needing to run. Then, from the middle of the table, Ruth Kendrick spoke. She'd had 2 glasses of eggnog by then. Her cheeks glowed pink, her voice carried the bright, unfiltered cheer of someone unaware she was about to level the room. "Oh, I'm so glad to hear that, Vanessa. Honestly, I was a little worried after that second missed payment popped up in the system. But if you're back on track, well, that's just wonderful." She delivered it the way she delivered everything, warm, neighborly, convinced she was offering comfort. The table fell so silent I could hear the candles exhale. Derek drew his hand back from where it had rested near Vanessa's, slowly, the way a man withdraws fingers from something scalding. "Second missed payment?" he repeated. His voice stayed low, controlled, the kind of quiet that carries farther than shouting. Vanessa's mouth parted. "Ruth, that's private." Ruth's flush deepened to scarlet. Her hand flew to her lips. Oh dear, I'm so sorry. I thought you two had already. I assumed." She hadn't intended harm. She hadn't intended anything. But truth has a habit of slipping through the smallest fracture. And Ruth Kendrick, God bless her, had just brought the wall down. Derek's fork remained in his right hand. He set it down, not gently, not roughly, but with the deliberate care of a man who understood that carelessness with small things leads to collapse of the large ones. Vanessa. His tone was a flat line. How much do we owe? Not here. How much? No longer a question, a door sealing shut. Vanessa pressed her lips together. Her eyes glistened. The new earrings she'd chosen for the evening, the ones that had sparkled so perfectly in candlelight an hour earlier, now seemed the most expensive piece of a disintegrating disguise. She said nothing. My mother stepped forward because my mother always stepped forward when Vanessa's story was at risk. Derek, every young couple starts with some debt. It's completely normal. Let's not turn this into something it isn't. Derek turned to Lorraine. His face remained unchanged, but his voice grew quieter. Anyone who knew him recognized that as the more dangerous register. Mrs. Bellamy, did you know about this? I helped where I could. She helped with my money, Derek. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. $4,200. I was told it was for roof repairs on this house. It wasn't. Derek held my gaze for a beat. Then he looked at Vanessa, the woman he'd married, the woman he'd planned a life with, the woman who had apparently constructed that life on someone else's funds and mutual silence. He lifted his napkin, folded it once, set it beside his plate, then pushed his chair back, the legs scraped the floor, sharp in the hush, stood, took his phone from his pocket, and walked to the front porch. Through the glass door, I watched him stand in the falling snow, phone to his ear, face illuminated by the porch light. No yelling, no pacing. That was worse. Vanessa was crying now, not the poised, cinematic kind, the real kind, mascara streaking, breath hitching, the kind that leaves a table of admirers unsure where to rest their eyes. My mother remained standing, hands braced on the table edge, her face cycling between fury and something raw. Fear. The fear of a woman witnessing 13 years of carefully curated narrative begin to crumble in real time. This is what you wanted, isn't it, June? Her voice trembled. To humiliate your family on Christmas? No, Mom, I just stopped pretending. Your father... She caught herself, then pressed on anyway because the weapon was all she had remaining. Your father would be ashamed of you. Before I could answer, a chair scraped at the far end. Margot stood. She wasn't tall, she wasn't loud. She was a 61-year-old woman in navy cardigan, one fingernail still edged with potting soil from the shop. But when Margot Bellamy rose, people listened because she only rose when the moment demanded it. Lorraine. Her voice was clear, steady, the voice of a woman who had stayed silent for years and selected this precise instant to speak. Lorraine, my brother would have been ashamed of how you've treated the daughter who was most like him. Lorraine opened her mouth. Margot continued. I know June sent $31,000 to this family over 3 years. I know because I showed her the records. And I know she just bought her own house, cash, because I stood beside her when she signed the closing papers. The room pivoted to me, every face. Uncle Don's mouth hung open. Aunt Patty pressed her hand to her chest. Lily's eyes widened. Even Ruth, still reeling from her unintended detonation, stared. You bought a house? Uncle Don asked. I nodded. My mother emitted a short, sharp sound, half laugh, half disbelief, and shook her head. A house? You? Her pitch climbed into the register she reserved for threats to her established order. With what money? You don't even have a real... She cut herself off one word too late, but the unfinished sentence hung in the air like smoke. You don't even have a real job. I stood, not quickly, not theatrically, just the slow, deliberate motion of a woman finished receiving judgments from a seated position. I looked at my mother, then at Vanessa, face blotchy, streaked, undone, then at the table, 14 people who had observed my gradual diminishment for years and never intervened. You asked when I was going to settle down. My voice remained even, quiet, the kind of quiet that draws people closer rather than pushes them away. I already did. I paid cash, $159,000. No mortgage, no debt, no one else's money. I turned to my mother. I just didn't invite anyone who doubts me. The room halted. I mean, it stopped, like the universe hit pause. 14 people suspended mid-breath. A fork slipped from a plate, Aunt Patty's, I think, and struck porcelain with a bright crystalline clink that rang through the silence like a struck bell. 5 seconds, I counted. My mother's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing. Vanessa stared down at the table, hands flat beside her plate, shoulders curling inward like a structure missing its central support. The Christmas music continued from the Bluetooth speaker on the sideboard. Silver bells. The irony would have been almost humorous if I hadn't been shaking from the inside. No one spoke. No one moved. The candles wavered. For 5 long seconds, the only sound in the Bellamy dining room was truth, settling into every corner like the season's first heavy snow. My mother recovered her voice first. It emerged cracked, stripped of its usual gloss, like pavement after a deep freeze. June, I did what I had to do for this family. No, Mom, I did what you had to do for Vanessa. I was the one doing for this family, and I'm done. Vanessa looked up. Mascara had carved twin dark tracks down her cheeks. Her voice came out fragile, the voice of someone grasping for a lifeline she fears may already be severed. June, I didn't mean for... You knew, Vanessa. I held her gaze, not with anger, but with something weightier. The calm, weary clarity of someone who has exhausted every excuse for pretense. You took the money. You knew where it came from. And you posted, "Thanks to the best mom ever." You didn't even text me. She had no reply. She dropped her eyes to her plate. For the first time in 30 years, my sister had nothing charming left to offer. I drew a slow breath. When I spoke again, my voice was gentler, not from weakness, but from finality. I love you both. I do. But I won't be the invisible bank account anymore. If you want a relationship with me, it begins with seeing me. Not my wallet, not my silence. Me. I reached behind my chair, lifted my coat from the backrest, slipped it on, and zipped it closed. I glanced at Margot. She was already on her feet, purse tucked under her arm, as though she'd been waiting for this exact second since she arrived. "Merry Christmas, everyone." I walked to the front door. Margot followed. Behind us, 12 people remained at a table laden with food. No one was eating. The only sound was silver bells drifting to an empty room. The door closed. Cold air struck my face. I kept walking. Snow fell heavier now, large, soft flakes catching the porch light, glowing gold for an instant before settling on the railing and vanishing. Derek still stood on the porch, phone to his ear, breath clouding in the chill. Our eyes met for one brief second, not hostile, not warm, just the quiet recognition between two people who'd both learned, tonight, that the foundation beneath them had never been solid. I reached my car. Margot reached hers. We didn't speak until we were inside our separate vehicles, engines running, heaters pushing warmth against the cold. My phone buzzed. Margot. One text. "You did good. Drive safe." I pulled away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, my mother's house receded. The string lights, the wreath, the dining room glow where 14 people sat amid the wreckage of a rewritten story. I drove 20 minutes to my house. My house. The key was still new. I had to jiggle it twice. The door opened into darkness. I found the light switch by instinct. The living room stood mostly bare, hardwood floors, white walls, a reading chair in the corner, a gift from Margot delivered the week before, and a floor lamp beside it. That was all. I didn't play music. I didn't check the group chat. I sat in the chair, still in my coat, and watched snow fall across a yard that belonged to me. My hands trembled. I folded them in my lap and waited for the shaking to pass. I had expected triumph. Instead, I felt empty, the profound emptiness that arrives when you finally set down a burden you'd carried so long you forgot its weight.
Yet beneath that emptiness, below the tremor and the cold and the echo of my mother's face, something small and new stirred. Quiet, tentative, like the first green shoot breaking soil after endless winter. Relief. The week between Christmas and New Year's is meant to be quiet. Mine wasn't. Derek texted on December 26th. 2 lines. I checked the credit report last night. I didn't know about any of it. Thank you for being honest. I replied, I'm sorry you found out that way. He sent a thumbs up. Between people who trade in facts, that was enough. From what I later gathered, through Margot, through Aunt Patty, through the quiet currents of small-town news that move whether you invite them or not, Derek had uncovered $23,000 in credit card debt carried solely in Vanessa's name. The second missed mortgage payment was real. The glazed ham, 3-bedroom future kids' dream house stood one missed payment from a serious conversation with the bank. Derek didn't file for divorce, but he did 3 things. He required they see a financial counselor, he assumed control of their joint account, and Vanessa sold the leased SUV. She now drove his old pickup while he carpooled with a coworker. You could see it in her driveway, a dented white Ford where a glossy black SUV once gleamed. Uncle Don called my mother 2 days after Christmas. Aunt Patty was on the extension. They asked one question. Lorene, how much of what June said is true? My mother tried her familiar sidestep. It was blown out of proportion. You know how June is. Don cut her off. We're not fools, Lorene. We've known something was off for a long time. The role of the strong single mother who managed alone, the character my mother had performed for 13 years, closed its final act on December 24th. Ruth called me on 28th. June, honey, I am so sorry. I had no idea that would... You didn't do anything wrong, Ruth. The truth just needed some air. She paused. You sound like your father. I didn't know how to answer that, so I simply said, thank you. 3 weeks later, mid-January, snow lay deep, the kind where plows rumble through at 4 a.m. Their scraping wakes you, then lulls you back to sleep. I was unpacking a box of kitchen items in my new house, secondhand pots, a wooden cutting board, a chipped mug whose handle fit my thumb perfectly. When my phone rang, Mom, I considered voicemail. Then I answered. I promised myself honesty. Ignoring her wasn't honest. It was only silence wearing a different face. June. Her voice was softer than usual, yet I recognized the familiar scaffolding she erected around requests. I've been thinking a lot since Christmas, and I want you to know I'm sorry you felt hurt by everything. I'm sorry you felt hurt, not I'm sorry I hurt you, not I'm sorry I lied about the roof, not I'm sorry I treated you like a credit line with a pulse for 13 years. The apology that isn't. I let it hang. She continued. Anyway, the January heating bill came in higher than expected, $620, and with the cold snap, I was wondering if maybe... There it was, the ask, tucked behind the apology, like a bill slipped inside a sympathy card. Mom, I said gently, not from weakness, but because the battle was already won. I love you, Mom, but I already told you I can't be that person anymore. Call the energy company. They have a senior assistance program. I'll text you the number. Silence stretched long enough for me to hear wind against her window. You've changed, June. No, Mom. I looked around my kitchen, my pots, my chipped mug. I just stopped disappearing. I hung up softly, set the phone on the counter, and watched snow fall across a yard that belonged to me. April arrived like it always does in small northeastern towns, slowly, then suddenly. Snow receded, gutters ran clear. One morning I stepped on my porch with coffee and saw it. The crabapple tree in my front yard had bloomed, pale pink buds, small and deliberate, unfurling along branches that had appeared lifeless all winter.
The house still wasn't fully furnished. The living room now held a navy blue sofa, secondhand, with one cushion torn and mended by iron-on fabric from the craft store. My desk stood by the window that caught the best morning light. Above the reading chair hung the photo of my father and me at the ice cream stand on Route 9, both of us squinting into the sun, both of us laughing. I still worked remotely, I still lived alone, I still wasn't married, and for the first time, none of it felt like a deficit. It felt like intention. Vanessa texted in March, "Can we talk sometime?" I replied, "When you're ready to talk honestly, I'm here." She hasn't called yet. I'm not waiting. My mother posts less on social media now. The "I manage on my own" declarations have vanished. I don't follow her page anymore, but Margot mentioned it once over tea. "She's quieter," Margot said. "I don't know if that's growth or just the aftershock. Time will show." Margot comes over every Saturday. She brings whatever flowers didn't sell by closing, whatever is still fresh and bright. The kitchen table usually holds a jar of something in bloom. We sit on the porch with tea and talk about ordinary things, the weather, new recipes, the neighbor's dog that keeps tunneling under my fence. One Saturday, she looked at the crabapple tree and said, "It's blooming earlier than I expected." "Some things just need room," I answered. She smiled. We sipped our tea. Here's what I understand now, after everything. I didn't burn bridges. I simply stopped crossing the ones that led nowhere. And I learned something no one ever says out loud. When you stop being invisible to yourself, it ceases to matter much who else fails to see you. The tree is blooming, the house is mine, the silence is gentle, and that is enough. That's my story. Some of you may think I was too harsh. Some may think I should have said more. Either way, tonight I'm sleeping in a house I own, mortgage-free, guilt-free, with no one's expectations pinned to the walls. If this reminded you of something in your own life, a boundary you've hesitated to draw, a truth you've swallowed to preserve peace, I'd like to hear it. Leave it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you'd like another story that lingers, there's one linked in the description I think will stay with you. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. Thank you for listening. Truly.